Okay, we are back, and let's talk a little bit about sound selection, because that's how every single drum pattern is going to start. So you'll be here in your samples folder if you've made one like me. If you're going to be using stock FL Studio drums, you'll be in your packs folder probably. Regardless, this is how every single time it's going to begin. So sound selection is to be honest, it's not something that you can teach very easily. I can give you a few pointers though, in regards to the way I do it. But this is literally one of those things that only practice will give you. Specifically developing an ear for the sounds that you like and the sounds that you think you can edit. So most of my sounds for this, except the tambourine loop and the open hats, come from a drum kit called Dope Drums, the Fat Loud one. Very good kit, I recommend you get it. So let's look through the sounds. Actually, in fact, I'll just go through here. So the kick that I've picked. Yeah. As you can see, it's got a nice kind of, it's fat, but it's still punchy. And there is like a kind of bongo sound on it. I have put effects on it. And the effects are making a difference. This one specifically was an EQ. What I did here was a cut. I cut the very bottom off. Sometimes when you cut the very bottom off a sound, like if I just go back to the beginning, you can hear there is a lot more subby kind of bass there. And what you'll find a lot of YouTube tutorials telling you to do is, if you want to get the punch, what they'll say is, well, let's imagine you're just throwing up an equalizer. And it could be the Fruity equalizer. It's okay. So what they'll tell, this will be how it sounds normally. The kick, I mean. So what most people will tell you is, oh, if you want to add the punch, raise some frequency. Maybe the punch is in the 500 hertz or 200 hertz or 1K or whatever. And, you know, to some degree you are raising the punch. But every time you turn the volume, you raise anything on an equalizer, what you're doing is you are turning the volume up. And every time you're turning the volume up, you're making something louder and filling space. This is space that can be filled by something else. The technical fancy speak for that is additive equalizing, which is where you are adding, you are pushing the volume up. Generally speaking, to keep a mix clean, you should be very minimalist about what you're doing. And one trick that we have to add punch to the kick is to filter it out here at around 50. And when you actually take frequencies away, the very low ones, the kick gains punch. It gains punch from you taking away the very low frequencies. Anyway, mixing is actually in the next part, but there you go. We've talked about it, so you know that these sounds aren't completely stock. Now for the shakers and hats. Because what I usually do with the shakers and hats is I put them at just about the same time as the kick, if not a little bit later. Pay attention to when these sounds start. Look at the front tail of it. It's not an abrupt, like a very abrupt sound. Like, for example, if I just pick any random kit. If you look at that wave over that shows up here, it's got a very abrupt beginning. There is no tail at the beginning. I personally don't like sounds like that because it creates a very robotic kind of feel. I like it when a sound takes some time to begin and takes some time to end. So that's one of my personal things. Of course, you'll find your own style eventually. There's a tambourine and a shaker. And if I just solo these two tracks together, this is what they sound like. And now with a kick. And you'll notice how everything's a bit late, but again, that will come later. So with the hi-hats, with those kinds of things, don't be afraid to layer. Generally speaking, with layering, and I'll talk about this further later on, but the general rule with layering is this. The less you can do, the better. But this applies more to lower frequencies than higher frequencies, because higher frequencies don't get as muddy as lower frequencies do. So when it comes to layering hi-hats, go crazy. Do whatever sounds good to your ear. With kicks, I kind of go against the mainstream advice. I think if you have to layer a bunch of kicks together, then you're simply picking the wrong sounds. And it becomes very difficult to mix if you want to get a really clean mix. Now for these hats here, I'll solo them out because by themselves they don't sound very good. Yeah, so this pattern here, you can barely hear it in the context of the whole drum loop. If I play it, it's pretty much overshadowed by the tambourine. But this is one of those things, just as I was saying right now about layering hi-hats. Because it's high frequency, you can do as much kind of layering as you want to get the kind of texture you want. When you're thinking of hi-hats, don't think of hat, especially if you come from a classical background where, you know, a hi-hat is a hi-hat, a trombone is a trombone. Just think of texture and try to build something that sounds, you know, if you want thick, great, build it thick. If you want something thin, like a kind of Ninth Wonder sort of beat, then yeah, definitely do that. Now the clap, this is a delicious sound. There are effects on it, just so we're being fair. I've used an equalizer. I've cut the bottom off. And also I've raised the highs a little bit, and there's also a little bit of reverb on it. I will explain that further later, but this is just so you know that these sounds aren't like that out of the box. Now, the interesting thing I did here is layering the tambourine with the clap. And this goes back to the point about building textures instead of, you know, oh, this is a kick, this is a clap, this is a hat. This is a beat, and sound is sound. Yeah. Now, if I take that tambourine off, it's still good. It's a very good sound. But I just felt like this adds a bit of brightness to it, the tambourine sound. It's very nice, it's bright. I put a little bit of reverb on it. That's all I put on, nothing else. And these are the perks, these are the things that add nice flair. Adding little things like this, these, you know, perks and ornaments, if you will, this is what gives a drum beat, you know, something unique. Producers who are really good at this are Timbaland, for example. He adds, you know, these little tiny things to a beat that really differentiate it from, you know, Joe cookie cutter producer on his MPC hitting hi-hats and snares and nothing else. And last but not least, my absolute favorite ingredient in all beats is the tambourine. This is a loop, and yeah, it's not arranged perfectly in time, but we will get onto that just a little bit later. For now, we're going to leave the open hats though, because they're not part of the main drum beat. And now when we bring everything back, so to summarize, with kicks, pick something that's either punchy or fat. Don't try to pick a kick that covers every single thing, because when you're trying to play your bass line in, a lot of times, you know, a kick that covers a really, really huge wide space is going to get in the way of your bass line, because they're both very low frequencies. As far as the shakers and hats, generally speaking, try to find something where the beginning isn't completely abrupt. Sometimes it works, but especially for the hats that go on the, you know, the first beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, on those beats, the more open a sound, the more of that thickness you can get. With claps, I'd say this is down to taste. Generally speaking, claps and snares, if you can find a sample that's nicely layered, that's good. If not, you can layer by yourself. With snares and claps as well, there is a trick that you can use. I didn't use it in this beat. Actually, I think I did. I think I used it on this equalizer. No, I didn't. So it's already naturally programmed in. But generally speaking, if you have a snare and you want to get a really nice kind of toof kind of sound out of it. It's difficult to explain. Most of the time, you will find it in the 200 hertz area. If I play the clap now, having raised the 200 hertz, I'm being ridiculous, but you get the point. There's a really nice frequency there. You don't raise it that high, you raise it a little bit. And to be honest, unless you're trying to make, 808 style drums, most of the time this is going to apply to pretty much any snare you can do. So that's just a little trick that I gained from experience. 200 hertz is where the good frequencies are hidden. So yeah, that's it for sound selection. And next we're going to be moving on to the arrangement and, how to get the bounce out of your drums.